So, you ready? Okay.
Yeah, take it away. Thanks, Gloria.
Could you just put in chat, if a 1 if you are a vision teacher yourself, and a 2 if you're just working on your own vision and you're not a teacher? Trying to get an idea who's here so I can speak to you.
Yeah, I think we will have most of the public on Saturday, Gloria.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, good. All right. Well, I will talk to you as teachers, and then anybody listening to this afterward will just get a little different viewpoint, a more an insider's view. So the topic that I picked for today, when Nathan was talking to me about what to do, was how to turn your flashes into permanent improvement. Because this is a question that comes up over and over again. I'm sure as teachers, you have come across this. I get flashes of clarity, but I don't know what to do from here. And that's, I think it's a misunderstanding of the different steps in vision improvement. That's a big part of it. And then how to, there's several things I want to go into here. One is how to integrate the techniques into your daily life. In a way that makes a more permanent change in your vision. And a second is an understanding of favorable conditions and how to use that to make a more permanent shift in the vision. So those are my two primary topics today. The concept of favorable conditions, I think, is kind of a footnote to a lot of people. It's just, okay, one of the little steps in the 7 Truths of Normal Sight by Dr. Bates is normal sight is always normal, but only under favorable conditions. And that's just sort of like, well, sure, of course, so what? But so what is huge, because it's the key to bringing vision back to normal. With normal sight, a person almost always has normal sight. Almost every condition for seeing is favorable for them to see perfectly. There are just a few conditions where they don't see perfectly. So it's like this narrow little window where they might lose it on an unfamiliar object, or as Dr. Bates discovered, you show them an unfamiliar writing, diagram, map in the distance, their eyes temporarily go out of focus because the mind will strain on the unfamiliar. So there are very narrow places where the vision is not normal, but with imperfect sight, most of the conditions of seeing are unfavorable. So most of the time you don't see clearly. So what you're looking at as a teacher, or what I look at as a teacher, I should say, is where is that narrow window? Somebody needs to be muted here that's not muted. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. But if you're looking for, as a teacher, what I look for as a teacher is, where's that narrow little window that's favorable for them to see perfectly? What is that? So you find where's under the most favorable conditions, the most favorable size of letters, the most favorable lighting, the most favorable distance for that particular person to work. Where can you produce clarity in their vision? Where is it easiest to produce clarity in the vision, I should say, because you can produce clarity in the vision in a lot of ways. But where do they get more consistent flashes, more easily and quickly? And that's what I look for in the very first session with somebody, is I'm going to try out some different options to see what's the most favorable condition for that person, where the vision will sharpen up right before your eyes. And I know you've seen this if you've been teachers, when you work with a technique that's working, the vision clears up right then. It doesn't stay, but it's this flash of clarity. So where is that little narrow window where they can see perfectly? Because once you find that, you have a way to then gradually expand to where more and more conditions become favorable for that person. So that's, I've written 2 books on favorable conditions. I just think it's really important, and they're not out yet in a public way. I have them in a training manual, which I use for my membership group right now. But that's the whole point of favorable conditions, is where can you make change? What environment? There's 2 different factors in favorable conditions. One is the environment, the is there noise outside? Are you under pressure? There's all these other factors about the environment. Are you feeling comfortable? Is it feel like a safe space? There's all these factors about the environment. And then there's the other side of that, which is the object that you're looking at and what the distance is, the size of the object, the lighting, and so on. So I have this all broken down in a whole diagram of all of these different aspects, actually, because I've done a progression of improvement for each of the 7 truths of normal sight. So from the beginning to the advanced, and how do you get there, and the whole strategy for that. But on the favorable conditions, that's what you're looking for, is where can you make that change? Once you find what makes that change, almost inevitably, people want to start pushing it farther away. They want to start staring. There's all these things they do wrong from that point, and then you can't reproduce it. So the first step is to produce the change, and then you want to be able to produce that change consistently. So to do that, in that second stage of vision improvement, first stage of vision improvement, or first level of vision improvement, you're just a beginner, you've not had experience with your vision. The second level of vision improvement, you have flashes of clarity, but you don't know how to produce them at will. They come sort of unbidden. and then the third stage of vision improvement, as I have narrowed it down, is that I would call it vision on demand, where you're able to produce clarity on demand pretty consistently by doing a certain technique, by looking in a certain way, by shifting your attention in a certain way. You can pretty consistently produce clarity in favorable conditions. And so that's, and there's like 7 steps to normal sight, 7 levels of stages, getting back to perfect sight being a level 7. But in that transition stage, which a lot of people don't get past, of going from flashes of clarity to being able to produce it consistently, to having a real change in the daily life, which would be the 4th level, where it's you have periods of clarity that are going into your life in a much better way, and then you expand the clarity, then you work on how to advance them in unfavorable conditions. In those first 3 steps of vision improvement, it's important to work in the most favorable conditions, because you won't get change if you're working in dim light, if you're working 20 feet away when you're nearsighted, if you're working, you have to find where you're going to get the most favorable condition for that person. And so you want to get the change, then you want to develop the skill in developing that change. So you duplicate, and you have to dodge as soon as the vision clears up. But no, you know this, but you have to dodge the clarity so that you don't stare at the clear image, because what you're doing when you're staring at that clear image is you're saying to your mind, this is not normal for me to see clearly like this. I better hold on to it while I have it, because it won't stay. You're programming your mind for failure, completely. So, that won't work. Well, it will work if you want failure. You will get success at that. But so you want it to be the normal state. It's like, oh, of course it's clear. It's the blur that's the aberration. You need to shift that mindset to where this is what feels normal to me, is to have clear vision. And there's many ways you can do that. And one of the ways is just giving yourself more experience of clearer vision in an obvious way, which is why I'm very picky about what distance I work with people, because the nearsighted person working too far away, going from a blur to maybe less blur is rather difficult to determine. So you want to demonstrate to your mind, to your unconscious mind, when I do this, vision's sharper. So you need to work at a distance where they can see it become clear, not just maybe it's a little better, I don't know. You want to see, oh yeah, that's really clear now. And so that you're demonstrating to your mind. I know Dr. Bates used that term, demonstrate. And for a long time, I didn't really understand why he's talking about demonstrate all the time. But I really get it now, because you want to demonstrate to your mind what works and what doesn't work, because the mind learns from experience. It doesn't learn from telling it anything. Like you watch a TV commercial, nobody goes on there and says, you should buy our soap because it has such and such and such product, and it has this and this ingredient, and studies have shown that blah, blah, blah. They don't do that. They go, "Oh, Johnny, you're so dirty. Let me wash that. Oh, look how clean you are." And you have this secondhand experience of that detergent really working. And so, it works. And even though you know it's fake, it still works because you have the experience of it working. And so with vision improvement, you have to have the experience. You can't just tell it. You have to know from your own seeing with your own eyes, this really sharpens my vision. And at first you don't know exactly what is sharpening your vision, and you may not know intellectually, but can you duplicate it? Can you duplicate it over and over again? Because your unconscious mind knows what to do. And to make that happen, you have to work in a favorable condition to get that to work. Now, I don't go into unfavorable conditions until much later, into like the fourth step or so, because then you want to start bridging into unfavorable conditions. And the last step is where your vision is clear all the time, except under the adverse conditions. I had a client who was a video editor, and his vision would be perfect most of the time. As soon as he would feel under pressure with people, needing this and that, and while he was doing his work, he would lose it. His actual, certain things he did with his work were unfavorable condition because of the pressure he felt. And so that's the last step, is where you learn to keep that clarity of mind, that state of mind that brings the vision clear under the worst conditions, under the most unfavorable conditions. So I don't start there, in there, and you bridge toward it, towards those later steps. But that's the basic idea about how to build more consistency in the change. But producing the clarity in a practice session is really good. But if they don't integrate it into their life, it will have a very fleeting benefit, because you're changing a mental habit in how you're seeing. And I know I emphasize the mental side a lot, but I have found that to make a permanent change in the vision, you have to change something in here. You have to shift something internally. The mechanics can sharpen up the vision, but if you don't use those mechanics to change the mindset, you haven't made a permanent change in the vision. So it's when the vision's clear, you don't want to hold on to that clear image. You want to maintain that state of mind that made it clear, so that you can have it clear all the time. So how do you get familiar with that? One way is just to keep duplicating the clarity. The other thing I found is, as soon as I find what's working for a person, I'm going to back this up one more step. The first thing I do when I work with a client is I loosen up the strain. And I'm sure you do this in your own way. I use the shifter mainly to do that, because I found eyes closed with a sunlight, ideally, or light if I don't have sun, is the easiest way for most people to let go of the strain, because closed eyes is a favorable condition for most people. With their eyes closed, they don't strain so much. It's easier for them to not strain. You can also take like those little piano keyboard shifters and bring them really close to the face, where you're not trying to focus on it. And that can also be favorable, because it's so close, you're just not straining, you just give it up. So yeah, Nathan's got one there. So you can bring it in really close to your face and use that as the same kind of way, really close, because you just give up the strain. So I loosen up the strain. And then the next thing I do right away is I want to find out what types of techniques are working for them. So I will bring them in, and if they're working on close vision, I'll work with small print close up or graduated size type. If they're working with distance vision, I'll work with letters, and I'll experiment to see what distance they can see a certain kind of letter. I usually use something like this, where the smaller letter is pretty good. I mean, you should be able to read that technically at 10 feet with perfect sight, but I'm looking for what distance they can read, at least the next to the bottom line on something like that, because I find if you hold it at too far away, where they can't see smaller, they start straining and they can't get out of it. So I'm looking for a favorable condition, and for most people, nearsighted people, that's fairly close, where they can see pretty small letters. So then I'll do that and I'll find what technique is going to work for them out of that, whether it's the shifting, the central fixation, the memory imagination, whatever the type of technique is. I'll experiment really quickly to see what's going to bring the clarity into their vision. And then once we find something that really is clearing things up, we'll work with it again until we can develop more consistency in it. And then I immediately have them apply it to objects, not just on letters, because you want to take it into your life. So it becomes a way of seeing throughout your day. So once it's clear with the letters, then and I don't mean like 10 minutes of letter practice, I mean a minute or two of clarity with the letters, then immediately applying the same thing with objects. And oftentimes while they're clearing things up with the objects, they may or may not notice that it's as clear, but they'll have them glance back to the letters and the letters will be clearer and they can see, oh yeah, that was working. Even though I couldn't tell on the object, I could see it when I come back to the letters. So the integration, I jumped right into the integration so that they can apply. If it's motion, they apply, how can I see things moving out there? How can I refine that? And so on and so on. So that's back and forth between the letters and objects, letters and objects, letters and objects, because I want them to see what makes things change with the letters, and then I want them to immediately apply it in their life. So I found actually working online is a benefit in that way over in person because they're at home or they're in their office where they're working all the time, or they are most of the time. And so they're changing things where they are rather than coming to the office, making change, which can be helpful because you can create a nice, favorable environment for them to make change. They walk into your office, they can immediately see better. There's definitely a benefit to that. And the benefit of the online work I found is that you can get the change in where they are in space. And then they've already had that experience in their own space of their vision clearing up, and it's easier for them to integrate it there. So that's that's that on that. Are there any questions on this part so far? And then I'll go into the next section on the integration more in detail.
It did look like there was one question in the chat, Gloria, from Irina. It says, are you still staring at the point of slight blur? I think that came in when you were talking about not staring at the clarity that comes in.
Sorry, starting.
Yeah, you
Oh,
mean
starting.
it's clearer but not perfect? Is that what you mean by that?
I read it wrong. It's, are you still starting at the point of slight blur?
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Yes, Irina. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You want to have some room to improve. You don't want it to be perfect. Thank you for asking that question. That's a good question. On finding the favorable distance is I'm looking for where it's just slightly out of focus. And frankly, with people with astigmatism, it has to be a lot closer than it does to somebody who's just nearsighted, because with astigmatism, you can make out details when it's pretty blurred and pretty distorted and double vision and triple vision and all of that. But they can actually make out the letters, but they often don't get change at a distance where it's just too far for them. So my distance for, if astigmatism is the primary driver in the vision, I usually have that as a closer range than I would be for them seeing the same thing if they were just nearsighted, because there's just other factors going on with the astigmatism, and I've just found it easier to make change. But the thing is, you don't know with a particular person until you get in there and try it out and see what's going to work. And so instead of assuming this is going to work or that's going to work, I usually have a starting place. And then I work to individualize that to see, with this person right now, in this condition, at this moment in time, where they're rested, not rested, whatever, at this moment, what's the favorable condition right now? And that can be different another time of day. It doesn't mean it's going to be the same distance, the same object, another time of day. It's just learning how to find where it's most favorable to make that change. But yeah, it has to have some room to improve. And that's why I don't usually recommend people go from a -7 diopter prescription to 0, because they can work pretty close to make the change there, but most of their life is not this close. It's at least a computer distance away. So they need to be able to apply the techniques more in their life as they're going about their day. So I usually recommend they drop it down rather than go to nothing. For most people, it's just they can get better consistent change that way than just going to nothing for that reason. So okay.